What is a hunting miracle? Is there such a thing? Welcome to the Rock Dove Publications Quill. And during today's program, we're going to be looking at what a hunting miracle is. And we'll also be looking at that pro hunting argument, I enjoy hunting. Is that a valid argument? I enjoy hunting. Well, we'll be looking at what the Bible has to say about that.
Your host has spent decades studying the Bible in the original languages. He holds degrees from the University of Wisconsin, Moody Bible Institute, Asbury Theological Seminary, and Bethel Theological Seminary. With the help of some of his friends, in 1994, Dr. Rako founded a national volunteer ministry to hunters. He is an author, dog trainer, and speaker. Tom served as a full-time pastor for 36 years. Now here is your host, Dr. Tom Rako.
What is a hunting miracle? That is certainly a fair question. In fact, when I first contacted my friend Dr. Joey Hancock about any articles he could contribute to Hunting Miracles, Ancient and Modern, he quickly asked me to define hunting miracle. Now, I'm certainly aware that not everything that is identified as a miracle really is a miracle. On the other hand, just because some events are misclassified does not disprove the miraculous. The great Christian thinker and writer C.S. Lewis noted that respected missionaries frequently report miracles, and the Church of Rome claims they still occur to this day. Furthermore, many individuals have some episode in their life that may seem out of the ordinary. Lewis pointed out in his book, God in the Dock, no doubt most stories of miracles are unreliable. But then, as anyone can see by reading the paper, so are most stories of all events. Each story must be taken on its merits. What one must not do is rule out the supernatural as the one impossible explanation. In his book, All the Miracles of the Bible, Herbert Lockyer stated, "A miracle has been defined as a work wrought by divine power, for divine purpose, by means beyond the reach of man. The general idea is that it is something wonderful or unusual, an event, experience, or discovery so singular and strange to waken in one the feeling of awe." That is what many of the authors in this book, Hunting Miracles, Ancient and Modern, have come to realize. In fact, on a certain occasion or occasions, in some way or another, something special or very much out of the ordinary took place. For some, it was an answer to a specific prayer. With others, it was the manner in which God accomplished something in their own life or in something associated with the hunt. Furthermore, it's important to realize that if one added up the decades that the various contributors to Hunting Miracles, Ancient and Modern, spent in the field or in preparation for the field, the total amount of time would literally amount to centuries. There are moments when the God of the Bible, the God of creation, has chosen to speak to individuals in an area of their own expertise. When God does this, it's as if He is using a type of personal love language to reach out to or speak to an individual. Indeed, it is as if He stoops down to speak to a person in terms that can be easily understood, much like an adult attempting to explain a difficult concept to a small child. Take, for example, that great man of faith, Abraham. We know that Abraham was a herdsman who, when called to do so, was even willing to offer his son Isaac upon an altar as a sacrifice. This was something that evidently happened frequently among the pagans in that day. Of course, later in the Mosaic Law, the Hebrews themselves were warned not to participate in these wicked practices. However, the Bible tells us that in this case, Abraham reasoned that God could even raise the dead. Hebrews 11, verse 19a. Nevertheless, the Lord stopped Abraham and then commended him for his incredible obedience. The Lord also provided a ram caught by his horns to be offered in the place of his son. Abraham personally saw this as an act of the Lord's provision. We are told in Genesis 22, verse 13, Abraham looked up, and there in the thicket he saw a ram caught by its horns. He went over and took the ram and sacrificed it as a burnt offering. The Bible then goes on to state, "So Abraham called that place, 'The Lord will provide,' and to this day it is said, 'On the mountain of the Lord it will be provided.'" Genesis 22, verse 14. The fact that this ram was caught at this particular place and at this particular time was no accident. Indeed, this was a case of divine providence, an event that required extreme odds of transpiring. As a professional herdsman, Abraham saw this for what it was, the Lord's supernatural provision. I can't help but wonder if Abraham ever again came across another ram caught by its horns. Let's take fishing as another example of how the Lord used what was familiar in nature to reveal his power to his followers. On a certain occasion, the disciple Peter was told to cast a line into the Sea of Galilee and that the first fish he caught would have a coin of a specific value in its mouth. One day, Peter was questioned by those collecting as to whether Jesus paid the temple tax. Jesus explained to Peter an exemption to this tax, but then, in order not to offend, told him, "Go to the lake and throw out your line, take the first fish you catch, open its mouth, and you will find a 4-drachma coin. Take it and give it to them for my tax and yours." Matthew 17:27. I have many friends who have spent decades fishing, but none of them, including professional anglers, have ever caught a fish that had any kind of a coin in its mouth. I think it would be fair to state that those who spend a lot of time fishing on lakes, around ponds, or along streams would naturally have a significant degree of appreciation regarding this incredible method of provision given to Peter for the temple tax. We frequently find in the New Testament that the Lord used fish to speak to certain of his followers. Of course, some of the 12 were fishermen by trade, so we shouldn't be shocked to see that this is how Jesus Christ revealed some of his power to them. Matthew chapter 4, verses 18 to 22, you can read about that. He sometimes used a great catch of fish, Luke chapter 5. On other occasions, he multiplied loaves and dead fish, Matthew 14 and Matthew 15. Even following his bodily resurrection, Jesus employed fish to demonstrate his power to his followers, John chapter 21. The fact of the matter is, God can use anything he chooses to communicate his presence and power, not only to believers, but to unbelievers as well. In the book of Acts, the Apostle Paul was put in a situation where he was shipwrecked on the island of Malta with a large group of prisoners. The Bible states that immediately following the shipwreck, the islanders were very kind and built a fire for them because it was rainy and cold. The scriptures state, Paul gathered a pile of brushwood, and as he put it on the fire, a viper, driven out by the heat, fastened itself on his hand. Acts 28, verse 3. However, what followed was evidently a miracle. We are told, when the islanders saw the snake hanging from his hand, they said to each other, "This man must be a murderer, for though he escaped from the sea, the goddess Justice has not allowed him to live." Acts 28:4. I believe it is reasonable to assume that the local islanders knew exactly what type of viper had fastened itself to Paul's hand, and this probably explains why they assumed the worst. Nevertheless, the Bible states, "But Paul shook the snake off into the fire and suffered no ill effects. The people expected him to swell up and suddenly fall dead. But after waiting a long time and seeing nothing unusual happen to him, they changed their minds and said he was a god." Acts 28, verses 5 to 6. No doubt this particular miracle had a profound effect upon the islanders and, I believe we can safely assume, helped open the doors for presenting the gospel. This is one of those instances where something that was familiar to a group of people, in this case islanders, became a way in which the Lord demonstrated his incredible power. According to the Bible, nature itself is in one sense or another always conveying something about God. Roughly 3,000 years ago, the psalmist wrote, "The heavens declare the glory of God, the skies proclaim the work of his hands. Day after day they pour forth speech, night after night they display knowledge." Psalm 19, verses 1 to 2. In Romans chapter 1, Paul reminded his readers that every human being knows something about God by the things God has created. The scriptures state, For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that men are without excuse. Romans chapter 1, verse 20. Indeed, even a blind person can smell a lilac bush, hear a songbird, or touch a feather. The deaf can see the stars, observe a rainbow trout jump, or taste a fresh strawberry. I don't think it is too incredible to believe that even in our present age, at least once in a great while, God chooses to use something in nature in order to reveal his presence or power in a special way. Now, we should be careful not to place these experiences or providential events on the same level as Scripture. Nevertheless, it is important that we recognize God's invisible hand when he so chooses to reveal something to us. I believe it would be wrong to do otherwise. Today, many people in our highly urbanized society find themselves insulated from the great outdoors. As a result, there are certain aspects of nature that they, through no fault of their own, may know very little about. On the other hand, some of us who have spent very little time in a big city might be totally oblivious to what is usual and what is unusual in an urban setting. To Abraham the herdsman, a ram caught by its horns in some brush at a critical time could be considered a herding miracle. One might classify Peter, the professional fisherman, catching a fish with a specific size coin in its mouth at Christ's command, a fishing miracle. And the people on the island of Malta who witnessed Paul being bit by a poisonous reptile but suffering no effects might name this a wood-gathering miracle. So what exactly is a hunting miracle? For the purposes of hunting miracles, ancient and modern, a hunting miracle is a miracle which in one form or another relates to hunting. A hunting miracle may involve such things as astronomical odds, an answer to prayer, a supernatural outcome, a transformed life, or a great sense of wonder. Whether or not the events recorded in Hunting Miracles, Ancient and Modern, should all be accurately classified as the miraculous, I'll let you decide.
Hunting Miracles, Ancient and Modern contains true stories of how God has worked in the lives of hunters down through history. This unique work, edited by Dr. Tom Rako, contains true stories by 9 different contributors. In Hunting Miracles, readers discover miracles that took place on hunts more than 1,000 years ago. See how God has used deer, ducks, geese, and even wood ticks to reveal his power and presence. Be encouraged by how the prayers of desperate hunters have been answered in amazing ways. To order your copy of Hunting Miracles, go to the Rock Dove Publications website at rockdove.com. Again, to get your copy of Hunting Miracles, be sure and visit rockdove.com.
One of the pro-hunting arguments that is sometimes used is, I enjoy hunting. Some time ago, we received a question from a hunter who sent this to the Rock Dove Publications website. I have to sneak out of the house to hunt and fish, and I'm not allowed to take my children hunting with me. My wife considers hunting and anything with guns and bow and arrows to be sinful. I hunted and fished with my father until he died recently, and it was a wonderful experience. Can anyone provide me with scriptures that could help convince my wife that hunting with a gun or a bow and arrow is not sinful? Well, in general, hunting has clear foundational support in the scriptures. However, one hunting argument that hunters frequently lean upon, and clearly do so to their own detriment, involves the practice of making personal pleasure a priority. This type of single-minded self-indulgence is for all practical purposes a form of hedonism. Hedonism basically teaches that if something is pleasant, it's intrinsically good. Now, there's nothing necessarily wrong with pleasure. Nevertheless, a wholehearted pursuit of pleasure for pleasure's sake will always end in emptiness. The wealthy writer of the book of Ecclesiastes testified to this reality when he stated, I denied myself nothing my eyes desired. I refused my heart no pleasure. Ecclesiastes 2:10a. However, afterwards, he could only conclude, everything was meaningless, a chasing after the wind. Nothing was gained under the sun. Ecclesiastes 2:11b. The fact is, just because we may enjoy a certain activity does not automatically make that activity okay. In recent decades, the idea that if it feels good, do it, has governed many dumb and destructive decisions. Such a twisted and short-sighted view of life has helped spread venereal diseases, infected multitudes with AIDS, and caused individuals to accumulate mountains of unwanted financial debt. It is not only destructive to the person who stubbornly chooses to cling to this insatiable lifestyle, but eventually others are also adversely affected. I have personally met individuals who have suffered what I would deem significant emotional harm because a parent or loved one pursued their pleasure of hunting or fishing, and they did so to the neglect of their spouse, children, or both. Some time ago, a professional Christian counselor who himself enjoyed hunting and fishing told me that he had come to the point where he had almost quit both. His reason for abandoning these previously held passions had to do with the fact that a significant percentage of his clientele were now women who could quite accurately be classified as either fishing or hunting widows. Sadly, once the fishing or hunting season started, many of these female clients were, for the most part, abandoned. Sometimes the roles of the sexes are reversed, but in his practice he stated it was usually the male whom he saw as being guilty of spousal neglect. This particular counselor told me, I wish I could physically force some of these men to sit down and listen to the incredible pain that these women pour out in my office. The fact is, just because a certain activity may be considered pleasurable does not necessarily make such an activity morally justifiable. Indeed, sin itself normally carries a significant amount of innate pleasure. Pleasures that stem from or lead to sin are short-lived, and such pleasures which we know to be sinful should be rejected. Concerning Moses, whom God used to help lead the nation of Israel out of Egyptian bondage, we are told, he chose to be mistreated along with the people of God rather than to enjoy the pleasures of sin for a short time. Hebrews 11:25. Moses evidently made a conscious decision to choose God over pleasure. Nevertheless, it would seem that many in our day consistently choose pleasure rather than God. The New Testament foretold such behavior. When writing to a young preacher named Timothy, the Apostle Paul warned that in the last days there would be those who would be lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God. 2 Timothy 3:4. Certainly there is nothing wrong with many pleasures in and of themselves. Still, even good pleasures must be kept in perspective. When they are not, they become destructive. The things we enjoy in this world should never be allowed to hinder or replace our relationship with God. Indeed, real and lasting pleasure ultimately grows out of a relationship with the Lord. As the psalmist said, you have made known to me the path of life. You will fill me with joy in your presence, with eternal pleasures at your right hand. Psalm 16, verse 11. There's more we could say. When we come back, I'll have some final thoughts.
In Hunting Arguments, Biblical Responses to a Loaded Issue, Dr. Tom Rako takes direct aim at some popular but faulty arguments wielded by hunters and animal rights activists alike. This unique work introduces readers to 10 major arguments which are frequently invoked by their users to either condemn or defend hunting. Hunting arguments include such emotional appeals and false premises as, "Thou shalt not kill," "I eat everything I kill," "I could never kill an animal," "Hunting is my right as an American," "Jesus was a vegetarian," and "Would Jesus shoot Bambi?" Each chapter concludes with a set of discussion questions, making it a great resource for group studies. This book will help you to become an expert in knowing what the Bible has to say about hunting. To order your copy of Hunting Arguments, go to the Rock Dove Publications website, rockdove.com. Visit rockdove.com today.
Well, just to conclude, as we've been looking at the pro-hunting argument, I enjoy hunting. Hunters who use this shallow, self-centered argument in order to justify hunting fail to take into account the potential harm such an attitude can have on themselves and others around them. And the words "I enjoy" really offer no genuine or objective reason for the justification of an activity. After all, there are people who actually enjoy doing evil or who enjoy inflicting unwanted pain on other humans. Does the fact that these individuals enjoy participating in such behavior make that behavior morally acceptable? Well, of course not. And next time when we get together, we're going to be looking at another hunting argument. Thank you for joining us here on the Rock Dove Publications Quill. We'd love to hear from you, and let us know that you're listening to this program.
Been listening to the Rock Dove Publications podcast with your host, Dr. Tom Rako. This program has also been brought to you by the Quilted Arrow, home of intelligent, stylish, field-bred English pointers with bloodline streams from Hall of Fame champion Guardrail. Thank you so much for listening. Now, this is Beth Rako inviting you to join us again next time on the Rock Dove Publications podcast.